Hi, I'm Lady Fatblood, and I have temporarily hijacked this video. Now, before Fat Samurai Guy joins me for our Civil War discussion, I kind of feel like I have some explaining to do. Batman is my first love. I'm talking, I was in elementary school when the animated series came out, and I immediately became obsessed with the show. And this was without any context of the Tim Burton films, as I didn't see those until much later. What can I say? I was late watching films. Short version, I'm Team Batman all the way. I eventually came to experience its highs with the Tim Burton films, sank lower than humanly possible in the Valley of the Shadow of Schumacher. Then I finally had my faith restored with the phoenix that was Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. Once we were given The Dark Knight, which is easily one of my favorite films of all time, I was once again a firm Bat fan, and nothing else in the way of superhero films interested me as much as Batman did. I knew of the Marvel stable of characters. I mean, who hadn't heard of Spider-Man, Captain America, or X-Men? And I loved the X-Men films, X-Men and X-Men United, and I was crushed by the disappointing X-Men The Last Stand, but my personal investment and loyalty always lied with the Bat. As much as I enjoyed the first two X-Men and Spider-Man films, it wasn't until 2008's Iron Man that I began reading up on the rest of the Marvel roster a bit more, and I feel that's a true credit to how well that first film was made. It took a character I knew next to nothing about and made me not only like him, but want to see more of him. I was also intrigued by the post-credits scene that dangled the carrot that was the Avengers in our face, and looking back now, I can't help but respect the incredible work that has gone into the past 8 years. With the disappointing Iron Man 2 in 2010, however, and with the first Avengers not slated until 2012, I found my interest in Marvel waning and was looking more forward to The Dark Knight Rises, which was also slated for 2012. By the time 2011 rolled around, anyone following the lofty goals of the not yet owned by Disney MCU knew we still had 2 more films to go before we were to get the first spectacle given to us by the nerd god himself, Joss Whedon. Enter Captain America: The First Avenger. Now, origin stories are almost always a catch-22. You have to give the audience the information they need to become invested in the character. Unfortunately, that usually means less time with the superhero himself, and more time with him when he's just an ordinary schmo. And this can prove boring to many and a chore to watch a second time around. And while the first Captain America film somewhat falls into this category, I also feel this was absolutely as good as it was going to get for a Captain America origin story. And anyone that follows the humble origins of the forays into live-action superhero fare, they know Cap has been given much worse treatment. The first Captain America was everything it needed to be. It told you who Steve Rogers is, showed his human connections and loyalties, and made you feel his displacement in time by the end of the movie. In short, as far as origin stories go, it's pretty damn good. The cast was flawless, it captured the spirit of the 40s, and eventually helped set up the more grounded and human elements we'd eventually see in the Captain America sequels. It also helps that Chris Evans is extremely likable and is as adorable as a ball pit full of puppies. By the time the Avengers came out, aka the Iron Man and Loki show, we've been given some pretty serviceable to damn great origin stories, but having drunk the Whedon Kool-Aid, I basically decided that after 2 fun but not highly rewatchable origin stories and the lackluster Iron Man 2, I didn't give much of a shit what happened to any of the individual character sequels as long as they got the Avengers films right. And then 2014 rolled around, and I was given the unexpected punch to the gut that is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. We had already seen Cap in the present day via the Avengers movie, but aside from being the buff guy in the goofy blue suit, I didn't feel he became a formidable character until The Winter Soldier. We see him as a capable fighter, but more so, we see the true repercussions of his time displacement. You really get the feeling he's a man trying to catch up with his new surroundings while always knowing he'll never truly fit in. We're also shown how devastated he is that his only past connection in Peggy Carter has come to barely remember him. And aside from fully humanizing Steve, we actually get to see different sides of not only Black Widow, but also Nick Fury, something we simply didn't have time for in the Avengers film. Fury becomes compromised, completely taken off guard with Hydra's infiltration, and forced into hiding after nearly being killed. Romanov questions the way she's used to doing things to survive and sees the benefits of having a friend and ally in Steve Rogers. I know she has Hawkeye, but he's got his own thing going on as of Age of Ultron, and he's pussy whipped anyway, so he doesn't count. We also begin to see the stirring of mistrust Steve has with S.H.I.E.L.D.'s initiatives and dealings, elements that help set up the conflict in Civil War later. And finally, we're given the Winter Soldier, Steve's friend Bucky Barnes from the first Captain America. Now, I knew in the comic lore how back in the day they retconned Cap's terrible kid sidekick Bucky into the Winter Soldier, and I was so pleasantly surprised how they used the same actor, acknowledged all events from the first film, and even connected other elements from that installment. And while the Winter Soldier is guilty of the golden trope of a large-scale catastrophe scenario, the real heart and focus of the movie lies in Cap's desperate attempt to bring back his best friend. To make a long story longer, The Winter Soldier shocked me. Its tone was a complete departure from the first film. It went in a totally different direction rather than telling the same story a different way. The story was closer to real-world themes than any Marvel film, and the heart of the story was about Steve and Bucky. The action was brutal and fantastic while never feeling out of place or just for the sake of having an action scene. There was appropriate humor throughout. We were given another great character and ally in Sam the Falcon Wilson. And Alexander Pierce's actions helped topple S.H.I.E.L.D., which at the time was the only thing of consequence that had any permanent effect on the MCU. The Winter Soldier did everything a great sequel should do: acknowledge the previous film while expanding on it, improve and progress the overall story, which includes elements from not only the Cap brand, but the Avengers. And because of all of this, it became my favorite Marvel film to date. Another great film to add to my favorites list, and gave me genuine interest and investment in a comic book film property I hadn't had since Batman. So was it any wonder how difficult it would be for Civil War to live up to all of that? So did it? Let's discuss.
Stay down. Final warning.
I could do this all day.
What's up, guys?
Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes. And now it's time to get into the nit of the grit of Civil War.
So, did it live up to my expectations and my personal hopes and dreams for all the future of Marvel kind with the Winter Soldier? At first, no. What?
Get out.
Oh! Okay, so my first impressions right out of the gate, I was very confused by the choppy mess that was the opening action sequence, as half the team are going after Crossbones and Lagos. The frame rate looked off or something, I don't know, the editing wasn't attractive, and this was by far the worst attempt at hiding Scarlett Johansson's stunt double. Props to the stunt double though, good job. And this choppy mess continued on for the next two fight scenes, and not only disappointing but distracting. And it felt like some hack came in off the street that didn't know a thing about movie editing and fight scene filming and felt like they filmed it and edited it. It was like, can we have the Russo brothers back, please? Either that or somebody on the Russo team doesn't know how to film fight sequences. I don't know what happened. And then didn't you say that somebody pointed out that in the trailer, the fight sequences look fine?
Yeah, if you watch the trailer a little closely, the exact same fight sequences, just the shots of it that they were allowed to show in the trailer. I didn't notice any of that going around, like somebody running around with a handheld camera. But I didn't really notice that. But, it is what it is. So some of the action was okay in the beginning. It got the movie started. I really loved Scarlet Witch's powers, man. That was fucking badass, man. Her just levitating Cap up into the building, sucking out the smoke, holding the explosion down on a certain someone. Damn it. What happened? what the fuck happened? What happened? That's a little disappointing. As much as I enjoyed the film, this was a little bit disappointing. I'm going with the theory that Frank Grillo had some scheduling issues or something, because it was just a little odd. I mean, they really set up his character in The Winter Soldier. When I first started to watch The Winter Soldier, we watched in the theater, I was like, why are we spending so much time on this jobber? Like, who the fuck is this dude, right? Like, why are we spending so much time? And then by the end of the movie, I was like, okay, I get it. All right, he's going to come back as Crossbones. I got it now. I got it. But at first, I was like, they're really spending a long time setting up this guy or having him be in the movie. He fought Falcon at the end of the movie.
He was the leader of the Hydra insurgents within S.H.I.E.L.D. And it was
But that was our introduction to him, though. Like, we didn't really know who he was. He was just, S.H.I.E.L.D. agent number 5 or something, I mean, he even had an action sequence where the camera was following him throughout the corridors and the hallways of the building, and he's, like, shooting, like, 10 dudes all in one take, and I'm like, they're really giving this guy some screen time here. Why? What is this guy? Is this guy gonna die yet? But then by the end of the movie, I was like, oh, okay. And then at the beginning of this movie, he's dead. That's it.
Bye.
I mean, it was cool having him there. I mean, that was disappointing, I have to admit. I mean, it was cool having him there. And it was cool to see, just for a second, the Crossbones fighting Cap. When I used to collect comic books back in the day, I used to love seeing them brawl. They brawled all the time. He was Red Skull's minion, But it was just, this version of Crossbones, well, what are you going to do,
Plot convenience.
Yeah, it was tight. Scarlet Witch doing her whole, keeping the explosion intact. I mean, that was pretty dope. But it was just, Frank.
And we were given a little bit of retconning with the Winter Soldier and him being given code words from the Red Book that they're making such a big deal about. And the code words were spoken to make him ready for his compliance to accept his missions. It was kind of like a conditioning thing. And at first I was like, we didn't have any of that in the Winter Soldier. And then it was like, it didn't bother me so much, despite its inconsistency from the Winter Soldier. Because obviously there was no Red Book and there were no words and all that. But, if you really want to think comic book logic, Hydra agents already would have known about that. And it wouldn't have been a necessity to show any of that in that film anyway. So, it was all right. And I also thought it was kind of weird, but again, my brain kind of clicked off. It's like, it's a comic book, it's okay. Where Bucky was being electrocuted while the code was recited to him in the 1991 flashback. And then in the present day, all Zemo had to do was say the words to him, and he was ready, and he was under his control. It's like, okay, comic book movie, okay, it's fine. So I'm going to temporarily hijack this once again and talk about the score. Now, unfortunately, I was both happy and really disappointed. Obviously not enough so that I didn't go out and buy it as soon as I saw the film. Now Marvel, they're not known for their exceptional superhero scores. In fact, the composers change hands so often that Civil War is the first sequel to actually keep the same composer in the same franchise. Henry Jackman, of course, reprises his composing duties from The Winter Soldier for this film, and while I was thrilled to hear the fantastically intense and just kind of eerie Winter Soldier theme again.
Haunting.
Yeah. I was so sad not to hear the Captain America theme that he had given him for the Winter Soldier.
That was weird.
Now, and I've had some thoughts on this since I've seen it twice, and I've listened to the score about 10 times now. Now, Captain America's theme from his first film was composed by the legendary Alan Silvestri. Now, Alan Silvestri went on to do the first Avengers film, and he used his theme whenever appropriate, and then, of course, that's great. So, his theme for the first Captain America was completely fitting. It was a little cheesy, but endearing in that 40s heroic way. It was perfectly suitable. And it's really just listening to it on its own, it's like, it's old school Cap. It's really sweet. While Jackman's modern theme for Cap was everything it needed to be. It was serious, it was no nonsense, it was almost militaristic. And unfortunately, that theme is nowhere to be heard in this movie, save for maybe a fraction of a second by the end when he's fighting Tony, and instead we're given a slight derivative of it. And at first I felt this was a huge missed opportunity to further link the previous film to this film. And now I'm starting to think, maybe Jackman was being a little smart about it, because if you think about it, Cap is not the same person in this movie as he was in The Winter Soldier. By the time this movie ends, Captain America is no longer a government agent. He is a fugitive. And the new theme that he was given might have been indicative of that and might have been deliberate. So, yeah, I was disappointed because I really love that damn music from The Winter Soldier. But, second thoughts, it's like, well, he could have done it on purpose. And if so, well, good job. You're trying. I was also confused why we never heard Falcon's theme.
Yeah.
Okay, again, this was a theme created by Henry Jackman in The Winter Soldier. And Falcon had more screen time in this movie. Not even once did we hear it. And it's like, okay. Vision's theme was also regrettably absent, and even though that theme was created by Brian Tyler, Marvel has at times been known to share themes within their films. For instance, Alan Silvestri's Avengers theme returned for Brian Tyler's score at Avengers Age of Ultron. So that was a little bit of a shame. There was really no reason to not hear it, but, it is what it is. What I was pleasantly surprised to hear, however, was the theme that Jackman gave to the fall of the Avengers. It signals a clear and sad division and a marked end to something that was once great. And Siberia's theme, which also doubles as Zemo's music, was also wonderfully poignant and captures the mystery and emotional weight that his character brings to the film. So, me, being dumb and making the mistake of expecting a clear-cut and simple-to-follow story similar to Winter Soldier, my fault. I was taken aback by the first half of the movie and just how much we were being expected to follow. We were introduced to Black Panther, reintroduced to the conflict between Bucky and Steve, given the UN's proposal to leash the Avengers, and their subsequent split because of the proposal, and finally setting up our antagonist. Spider-Man even shows up! Whoa! Pfft. That is a lot of stuff to process compared to the basic Marvel fare that we're usually given. So because of this on the onset, my initial thoughts were, this is good, but it's no Winter Soldier.
Mm-hmm. I felt that too a little bit. Mm-hmm.
And then the movie was over. And after the total adrenaline and just magnificently joyous and happy surprise of the action sequence at the airport wore off, and the dust had settled after the finale of Tony and Steve's fight, I began to realize just what Civil War attempted to do and how gutsy it was for them to tell this kind of a story. So let's get into the character talk. First off, I loved Black Panther. Chadwick Boseman brought a quiet dignity and even quieter formidability to this character. Without overdoing it, you really feel Black Panther is not a character you would fuck with. The movie did a great job of not ham-fisting him into the story. That could have been a disaster. But instead, making him not only an integral part of things, but making his arc poignant and important. And even more so, important in establishing who he's going to be in the future.
He was so fucking badass that he was kicking Winter Soldier's ass, and he wasn't even in his suit. He was just regular street clothes, just running up the steps and whooping his ass.
I'm not completely on board with the possibility of a love story between Vision and Wanda.
You mean you don't want to see Jim Henson's Vision babies?
If only because I feel what has been done to them in the comics is weird.
Yes, it is weird.
It's a little weird. Yeah. I've read up into a lot of different things. It's like, this hurts my head. But these two, at least on screen, have a really good dynamic and chemistry. And once again, the writers, I feel, have done a really good job in fleshing out characters who simply didn't have time for any of this establishment and humanization during their introduction, in this case in the Age of Ultron. I felt Wanda was really easy to sympathize with, as you really feel her guilt over the incident in Lagos and why she initially agrees to be locked up. Mm-hmm. And there's no bones about it. She gets locked, and she even says at one point, "You locked me in my room." Now Vision is shown to truly care for her, as they both have abilities that they don't quite understand, and that was a really good thing for them to kind of latch onto with each other. And much like Tony, Vision is well-intentioned, though misguided, as he genuinely wants to protect Wanda and how he doesn't want her to be seen by others as a monster. Also, I adore Paul Bettany. I adore Paul Bettany as Vision.
Yes.
I adore Vision. More Vision, please. And then we had Wanda and Hawkeye's relationship. They got some more good screen time together, and I felt this was one of the few really great moments that came from Age of Ultron, where you got Hawkeye, who finally kind of came into his own, even though it was kind of ham-fisted at first with the whole, Hawkeye's a family man trope, and they did that just so that people could actually give a shit about him. When all they had to do was write him the way they eventually wrote him, with a sense of humor. He's just this ordinary guy, and he knows it, and he knows he has no place with these superheroes, but that's what kind of makes, I think Jeremy Renner playing him also helps a great deal. At the end of Age of Ultron, he's given this really great scene with Wanda. She's scared shitless. They're being attacked by all the Ultron bots. And he's like, look, you walk out that door and you're an Avenger, but I can't be looking after you and fighting these guys off at the same time. So if you want to stay put, you stay put. I'll send Pietro after you, and you'll be fine. But you go out there and that's it. You're an Avenger. And he's like, the city is flying. We're being attacked by robots, and I've got a bow and arrow. None of this makes sense. That was a genuinely hilarious scene, and it was a really good bonding moment between the two of them. And especially at the very end, when Pietro kind of sacrifices himself to save Hawkeye. Yeah, you kill off a character and nobody gives a shit.
Yeah, no, they didn't even mention him in this movie.
And so that aspect carried over into this also, which helped make Hawkeye's decision, because he was retired. Sure, because why not? So he's retired, but he comes out of retirement, and that whole subplot with Pietro sacrificing himself, which Pietro was Wanda's brother. And so he breaks out Wanda because he owes a debt. And I thought, okay, that's a good little throwback there. And it makes it more believable. And this also kind of helps make a little more sense why he would come out of retirement and then join the opposing side of his supposed friend Black Widow. I kind of scratched my head at that for a minute, but then they tried to do the banter thing. We're still friends, right? Depends on how hard you hit me. And then that's it. Never again. It's like, it's fine. It's fine.
I also loved Hawkeye's failed attempt at fighting Vision. That was bad, man. Like, that was embarrassing. Like, he just phased through him. Like, I was like, damn it, Hawkeye.
I loved the banter between Winter Soldier and Falcon. They only had like 2 scenes maybe towards the kind of the end with the airport, and a little after during the airport, actually. I think it was both. There's the scene where they're in this VW bug, and Winter Soldier's sitting in the back, and Falcon's sitting in the front. And Winter Soldier's like, can you move your seat up? And Falcon's like, no. And Winter Soldier's just like... And then you got the Sharon Carter kissing Cap scene, and Cap looks over, and they're both sitting there like... I died both. I saw the movie twice. I died both times. And then there's a scene at the airport. There's a scene in the airport where Falcon pulls this maneuver, and they're both, him and Winter Soldier are both flat on their backs, and Winter Soldier's like, you couldn't have done that sooner, huh? And Falcon's like, I hate you. I could have watched that for an entire movie. So because I'm laying all of my nerd cards out on the table, I feel I once again need to explain myself when it comes to Mr. Tony Stark. Although I loved the first Iron Man, and I find Robert Downey Jr. highly entertaining as Tony Stark, Tony Stark himself is not a character I'm necessarily in love with. Robert Downey Jr. was definitely born to play the role of Tony Stark. But I've found that over time, Tony is so arrogant and cocky, and he makes some of the dumbest decisions based on his arrogance, that it's sometimes difficult to not only relate to him, but to side with him. He's a good guy, good intentions, just dumb decisions. And this film, once again, gives us a side to Tony that we have never seen previously. We've learned that despite the Avengers' best efforts, there were actually many casualties in Sokovia, which is where the floating island took place, that whole finale in Age of Ultron. Tony meets a parent of one of the victims, and of course, as he does, feels immense guilt over this. Rightfully so, as Ultron was his well-intentioned mistake that he didn't talk to any of the other Avengers about. Bruce Banner was the only one who knew about this, and oh god, that went well. So this leads him to feel he has the right to make the decision for the entire team to agree to the Sokovia Accords, which is a regulation that will limit the Avengers' ability to step in and assist in dire situations. And of course he would. This is true to form. His arrogance would lead him to make a decision like that for everyone. But what was surprising was his reaction when Steve refuses to sign. We see Tony desperate to bring Steve into the fold and feel how disappointed he is when the team begins to kind of break apart. And Downey's performance throughout this film is simply just, it's a revelation in a lot of ways. We see Tony as his usual arrogant self be reduced to this guilt-ridden, desperate, and eventually rage-filled man. I have never enjoyed Spider-Man more. I find it so sad that we were given a better Spider-Man in 25 minutes of screen time than in 5 movies. I don't give a shit if the kid's 15. I don't care.
Fun? Fun? What is this fun? You can't have fun in a comic book movie. What are you talking about? Tom Holland was great. If you would have looked at me sitting in theater, but you were looking at me this way, you might be a little confused on my reactions to what's going on screen. Because many times, I don't know, it was 5, 6 times in the movie, I was watching the movie and I was going...
He was.
Right? And you'd think, well, like, he's probably like, what the fuck is going on? And what the hell is that? No, I was doing that because I couldn't believe what was actually happening in front of my eyes, okay? The whole apartment sequence, you know, with Aunt MILF, okay, and Tony Stark is there. I was in the theater like, this is actually happening right now. Like, this is happening right now. Like, we have a sequence right now where Iron Man is in Spider-Man's apartment and they have this great dialogue with each other. And I'm just like, this is happening right now? The whole entire awesome, unbelievable, could quite possibly be the best superhero on superhero action sequence, maybe, possibly, at the airport. I was doing the same thing. I was just like,
yeah.
Are you fucking kidding me? Yeah. Ant-Man is actually turning into Giant Man right now? Like, that's actually happening right now in front of my eyes? Like, really? That's actually happening. It's not even happening in Ant-Man's own movie. It's happening in this movie. There was just tons and tons of stuff like that.
It was a joyous scene. It was just, you just sit there and you're like,
yeah. Yeah, seeing Spider-Man. That was another one where I was just like,
yeah.
Just seeing him with this side of the Avengers. Just seeing him there and seeing him running with the team. I was losing my mind, man. I was just like... And the finale fight of the movie. I mean, not only was that fight entertaining, okay, but, man, that one shot, that one awesome, unbelievable shot where Captain America's running an Iron Man, and they have that still shot of him blocking with his shield the Iron Man's blast. I almost got up off the seat. I almost stood up. I was like, really? 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 You're just going to give us a little bit more of that fan service and give us almost an identical shot by shot from the graphic novel, from one of the pages. I mean, it was almost identical. Almost. And I just was like, really, guys? Fuck you guys. Fuck you for making me love this movie.
How dare you? One of the things that surprised me about this was I fully expected to go into this Team Cap all the way. As I had already believed in my head, I had preconceived notions. There was nothing Tony Stark could say or do about the regulations on the Avengers that I wouldn't be rolling my eyes and shaking my head at. And yes, for the record, I am Team Cap all the way. But the movie actually did a really great job of making everyone's motivations not only clear but relatable. We've already seen Cap to be resistant to external interference when it comes to individuals' ability to choose or preemptive protocols in general. And you can see that in the conversation that he has with Nick Fury at the beginning of The Winter Soldier. So of course he would never agree to the Accords, no matter how compelling Tony Stark's argument was. Now, Tony's side, on the other hand, though selfish and again misguided as he is, it comes from a place of true interest for the team, as he feels the life and death decisions will no longer be up to them solely, and it will no longer be a burden to the team when things go wrong. And there's the whole accountability thing, and I understood all of that, and that was fine and good, but at the end of the day, he really did it because he wanted to get back with his girl. How selfish is that?
Boo.
Really? But I really liked that they created that dynamic that he and Pepper split, because not only did it give motivation for him to want to kind of get away from the Avengers lifestyle, because he kept admitting, I didn't want to stop. And Cap, he didn't want to stop. Nobody wants to stop. And I think there was some really good revelations throughout the film with those two characters, that they say they want to stop, but no, they really don't. They're heroes. They're people who want to fight injustice. It's just Tony, he has his own reasons. I also like the dynamic of him and Pepper splitting, because it took that crutch away from Tony. I feel like Tony, as long as he had Pepper, he didn't need anybody else. And there's really no guarantee that they'd be able to reconcile. It made his need to keep the Avengers close-knit even more prominent, and a little more of an emotional investment for the audience. It's like, oh man, he's got nobody on the outside. He really needs his family right now.
Yeah, you know what? Now that I think about it, Pepper Potts not being in this movie kind of ruined it for me.
Oh.
She was my favorite character of all time. I mean, every single Marvel movie needed Pepper Potts. I mean, she really needed to be here. So you know what? I changed my mind. Fuck this movie, 0 stars.
Everyone else's choice in the Accord decision, either pro or con, is understandable as well. So one of the biggest criticisms Marvel gets is their lackluster stable of villains. And I can't argue too much here on this one, as I feel we've only gotten Red Skull once. Loki was too good of an act to follow. We've not yet truly seen Thanos, and D'Onofrio's Kingpin is small screen only. And for the record, I feel Kingpin is Marvel's best and most established villain to date.
Oh, yeah.
Every other villain has been either unmemorable or disappointing.
Malekith, Ronan.
Enter Helmut Zemo. Zemo's story was an interesting one, as he not only filled the role of antagonist, but provided the story with a huge red herring. We're led to believe that he's this nobody that is trying to topple an empire, as he puts it, by finding a secret stash of more dangerous and unstable winter soldiers in Siberia, where they've been stored on ice. Now, we're led to believe that he's going to release these winter soldiers and take over or destroy or whatever. The heroes are actually speculating on all of this, and he never states exactly what he's doing. We're just led to believe by speculation. We later learn, however, that the empire he has been referring to this whole time is the Avengers themselves. And his vendetta stems from the Sokovia incident, where he lost his entire family and the Avengers simply left without a second thought. And he said it best: greater men had tried to take down the Avengers and failed. And if you attack an empire externally, it can be rebuilt. But if you attack it from the inside, it's dead forever.
Great line.
There was no alien invasion.
Nope.
There was no city about to be dropped to Earth. There was no spaceship crashing into London, whatever the hell that was at the end of Thor 2. But instead, you were given a man trying to protect his older friend who had killed the parents of his other friend who now wants revenge. Of all the grand plots and finales where the world was about to be taken over or destroyed, Civil War's story was more personal than we'd ever seen before, as one ordinary man had managed to create a clear and maybe permanent rift in this once mighty team. This unremarkable person succeeded where other more flashy villains had failed. And some people say that he was an unremarkable villain. He wasn't supposed to be remarkable. He was supposed to be just plain, just nothing. That was the point of Helmut. And yes, they might have simplified things by omitting Zemo's thread, as this rift would likely have occurred on a smaller scale because of the UN regulation. But I argue the story wouldn't have been so cutting and personal without Zemo's manipulation. Steve and Sam would still have left the team. The Winter Soldier would still have been hunted by the UN, which would have caused an issue between Steve and Tony. The story would still have been there. But the true discord and final straw between Tony and Steve lied with Steve's knowledge of Bucky murdering Tony's parents and Steve fighting so vehemently to protect Bucky. I don't feel the story would have been nearly as effective without the two different plots running concurrently, not to mention what Zemo's story would have done to Black Panther's conclusion. Zemo killed Black Panther's dad. I've heard some people say that Zemo should have been cut completely from the film, but How? I don't see how at this point. And of course, everything ends with Steve offering his own olive branch to Tony, telling him if he ever needs him, he'll be there. But the Accords are still in place. The team is still physically and ideologically split. And we don't yet know how all of this will affect Thor and Hulk. Black Widow has gone AWOL because she helped Cap and, all that good stuff. And Black Panther, I feel like he's kind of stepped out of the whole thing. He ends with, he's stored the Winter Soldier in deep freeze back in Wakanda.
Till they can figure out what to do with him.
And Steve's like, when they find out that he's, that you're keeping him here, they're going to come for you. And Black Panther's like, let him come.
Let them come.
Fuck y'all. And the best part for my personal edification in storytelling, we now have the same writers and directors taking the reins of the next 2 Avengers films that have the ability to make all of these consequences stick. It's the personal stories that get to me. That's why I have so much love for the Winter Soldier. And while I feel personally, don't mind me, that the Winter Soldier is the better film, as it was so grounded and had a much more tight and just kind of straightforward story, and it was so surprising from the tonal shift from the first movie, Civil War managed to tell just as personal of a story while implementing more of the world of the Avengers and their style of action, which is something we're going to need to prepare for the final installments in the Avengers movies. I love how the film maintained the humor we've come to expect with these characters, but was dead serious when it needed to be. Perhaps the most serious thing we've ever seen in the MCU so far was witnessing the Winter Soldier flat out murder Tony Stark's parents. That's probably the darkest we've ever gone so far. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be the one proclaiming from the mountaintops that this is the greatest superhero film of all time. I don't do that. Okay, I don't oversell things. I only give my perspective. That's what we do. We discuss and we give our own personal opinions on things. I'm not going to be the one to say you need to go see this right now or you're going to regret it. Because you know what? Frankly, at this point, if you have no investment in the Marvel properties, you're not likely to enjoy this.
No.
In fact, if there is one fatal flaw in the MCU, which I don't consider it a flaw, I think it's fun, they have made it nearly impossible for any of their films to be a jumping on point now. And Civil War is no exception, as you need to have seen at least 4 films prior to this one to know what the hell's going on. I also believe that for the most part, up until Winter Soldier and Civil War, the films in the MCU have been pretty consequence-free and full of false stakes. Nothing really sticks. No character of true importance has died yet. And I feel Marvel needs to take that step and stick with it.
Yeah.
And again, the fact that I love so many characters within the MCU and I don't want to see any of them die is very telling of how much of an emotional impact it would have if one of the heavy hitters was to die later on in a future installment. I will say that I truly respect what the Russo brothers did here. And the realization hit me of what kind of story they were presenting me with. And because they managed to once again surprise me, I have to say, for my personal taste, this is one of my new favorite comic book films.
That's it for our discussion today. Let us know in the comments below, which Marvel movie is the number 1, is the best to you? Let us know, or give us your top 5. Once again, we appreciate all you guys for watching. You guys rock, and we'll see you next time.
Share, subscribe. Like, share, subscribe.